My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Say community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here at Let's Talk Dispatch. So happy to have you guys all here with me. It's so funny recording these intros because I obviously record early, then post them out later. But as we're building this podcast, this following, we're averaging about 400 downloads a week right now, which I think is amazing. That's 400 sets of ears that are hearing about this line of work, the wonderful work that all my guests are doing as far as dispatching, technology, so on and so forth. So again, thank you all so much for the support for the Let's Talk Dispatch podcast, and really getting the information out there to the folks who are really interested in learning about what we do as 911 dispatchers. My guest today's personal mantra is always happy to help. Eda has spent 20 years as a 911 dispatcher and is coming up on her 7th year at Motorola Solutions. And she's going to talk to me about her professional life and her experience as a 911 dispatcher and how that has moved into her new role with Motorola Solutions. Hello. How are you?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
I am good. How's your day going?
Pretty well. It's really cold out here in Idaho.
Oh, okay. So you are currently in Idaho.
Yeah, I live in Idaho, right outside of Boise, Idaho.
Oh, okay. So I went to school in Iowa. So I definitely understand the cold weather that you guys get on that side. And it's wild. I don't think I can do snow permanently.
I tell people often that when I started traveling, the weather in Wisconsin took me off guard because I thought I knew cold, but my coldest trip out there was minus 42 plus wind chill, and it was absolutely stunningly cold.
Oh my God. So I went to Iowa because I played basketball, and I remember specifically telling my coach at 7 a.m. during the winter that they left this out of the recruiting packet. It was negative 32 degrees, and this is the coldest winter we've had in years. I'm like, is it? I bet you if I look up the weather last year, it's probably this cold. I would need like 10 extra. I would have to get to practice 10 minutes early because I'd have like 2 layers of like long johns, socks, and he would always be mad at me, like, why is it taking so long? I'm like, I have California skin. Not only do I have Bay Area skin, the weather doesn't change here. It stays pretty consistent. We are not used to the cold. In fact, I remember my teammate, one of the first snows and the cars was ice. We were hanging out the window, driving down the street because we hadn't figured out the ice scraper yet. We didn't have or not use our card. We were just 21, going down the hill.
And here you are all these years later, you 911 operators getting the call from the people saying, hey, there's these people that haven't scraped their window. Yeah.
Now I live in California and I still have an ice scraper in my car as if it's gonna ever get that cold here. But now it's just a permanent fixture in my car because of that experience.
I get that. I carried one in my suitcase.
See?
Yeah.
Very smart. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into public safety and what's your story?
So I come from a very small town in Idaho, and my way to get out of town was to join the military. So I went straight from nowhere, Idaho, kind of near the Oregon border, to boot camp, went through my military career, And I was a radio operator on a missile site over in Germany off of the old Czechoslovakian border. And it was a very interesting career. Came back and became a legal secretary, which I thought was probably the most boring job in the entire world. And I was one of those people. I saw an ad for a 911 dispatcher, and I thought, well, I can take my legal background, I can take my radio operator background, I can put them together. In 1992, I applied and got hired onto our local sheriff's department. We did police, fire, and EMS there. Everything was on cards. It was all paper and pen. We wrote everything down. We had maps. I was just at an agency not a couple of weeks ago, and they are also just coming off of paper and pen. And I was explaining to them how our maps would lean over our console. And when you had a pursuit, that's how you followed the pursuit.
Oh my gosh.
You would be standing up looking at it. And at that time we had to do actual map tests too. You had to be able to look at a section of the county and fill in the roads that were on that section of the county. So it was just very different back then, but I took to it and I liked it. I liked helping. I liked being a part of something bigger than myself. And I really liked the camaraderie in the whole public safety arena. So I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I went to a local police department, and I finished out, 2 years at the sheriff's department, 20 years on the desk at the police department, and then 2 extra years as the manager of a records division.
So you have been putting in work all over the place, all the different types of dispatching. And I mean, I can imagine that going from, your military experience to that legal aid position or legal position, like that has to be like a real big change in adrenaline. And so I could only imagine why you were like, I got to get out of here. I got to find something that's a little more heart racing. Right. And
yeah,
I feel like most people, or a good amount of people do, they just kind of stumble into what we do here.
They do. It was also good for me because I was a single mom at the time, and I had a 2-year-old and 4-year-old, and it was 12-hour shifts were great. I had plenty of time off with my kids, and it was a good fit at that time.
Yeah. So let's talk about the technology, because I have said multiple times, I don't know if I could have done this job without the technology we have today. Obviously, I grew up when MapQuest, that was my job in the car. My dad would print it out and I would read it. That was my task. So I have, I think, a little better understanding about maps than maybe folks nowadays who are coming up are, because they're a little more far out from it. But we had to do map books at my first agency. We had to know kind of how, just in case our tech went down. And it's crazy. I just don't know if I could follow a pursuit on something that isn't telling me where my officers are as well, and then you're depending on them to know where they are. They don't know where they are.
No, they do not know where they are. I think that something that's really interesting too is that at the police department, when I started there, we dispatched fire as well. And we would have to look up a map page for them when we dispatched out a call. So you're taking the call, you're creating the call, and you're also looking up this map page for them. And I always thought, well, why aren't they looking up the map page? There's multiple people in their truck. Why am I looking at the map page? But yeah, we know how it goes. But right. Yeah, so it's very interesting to me. And I am a Star Trek junkie. I am completely upfront about that. And as a kid, I watched all this stuff on Star Trek that was, something we were never going to do, like talking into your watch. But today I'm looking at, agencies that are this agency that just came off of paper and pen, and they're going to a computer-aided dispatch center. And then through the last year with my team, I've been working with some software that is cloud-based, and it's for dispatch centers. And we have the technology that is coming into the modern day dispatch centers to me it's mind-blowing. There's the ability for a dispatcher to take a 911 call, and then if you're on your cell phone, she or he can send you a link, and you hit it and you can start videoing that crime scene, and that just drops right into evidence. There's the ability to have that 911 call being transcribed right as you're taking it, and have it highlight, watch for words and highlight, like if they have a gun, if there's shooting, and the amount of technology now that people are going to start being availed to as agencies start to transition more over to technical. I see, as I look in at dispatchers, it's going to change the way that they interact with the world. This concept of dispatchers answering the phone, that's what they do. They just answer the phone. They were already doing so much, whether you're working your foot pedal and you're listening, you're typing, you're listening to your partner behind you, you're looking at the map, all of that stuff already. But now we're giving you more tools, and it's good, but it's also very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I know, like, one of the fears I think that a lot of dispatchers have with this, I'm a technology person. Like, I love tech. I love hearing about new tech that's being utilized in our centers. And I know there's a lot of dispatchers who are nervous about the idea of like video dispatching. Like, you call 911 and you can see the person, like a FaceTime, right? But
Right.
with a 911 dispatcher. What are your thoughts on like that kind of technology? And is that something that might be coming sooner than later in our centers? And
one of the things that I like about the product that I work with, it's called Citizen Input, is that the dispatcher doesn't have to look at it if they don't want to. They can have that still sent. It can still drop into the evidence for digital evidence, but the dispatcher doesn't have to be watching it as it unveils. And I was always one of those people in the center. I didn't want to look at pictures. I didn't want to see, I didn't go through mug shots. I didn't look at, things, but there's very different ways of thinking about that. Some dispatchers, if they're already, if that's something that they want to be involved in, this is really awkward right here. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I like the fact that you don't have to look at it. You don't have to be engaged in that if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's good to have those kind of safety nets, right? Because I think in this line of work, there's a lot of things we don't have control over, including the trauma we're exposed to. So if there's something that we can limit or manage or, run through a funnel, so we have a little more control over the amount of trauma we're experiencing, for ourselves in that instance, I think that's only going to help in the longevity of that dispatcher's career, as well as provide that evidence and that documentation needed for the call still, right?
Right.
So what would you say is the biggest difference between the technology when you started versus now?
So when I started, when we got our very first computer, it was, the big box computer, and it had a black screen with the green typing, the green print, and all we could do was just run people in-house from it. I am thankful that I was not part of the era where they had the ticker tape that the ATLs would come out on, and they'd have to read the ticker tape. I'm like, I missed that, thankfully. But now when you're in a dispatch center, I mean, when we look at technology like Rapid SOS, and you can see right there where your caller is calling from before you ever engage with that caller, being able to see the AVL, we didn't know where any cars were when I very first started. So I started in 1992. I don't think we had AVL till I don't even know when we got ABL. So they could be anywhere all the time. Just one of the things that I think about as I'm looking at consoles now is there's so much visual information available. You don't have to think so hard about what you're trying to track anymore, whether it's your calls are turning a color, they're moving on your screen, you can see where your cops are, your map can zoom to where it needs to go. It's amazing now what technology can do for us.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, even the technology that's coming out in the world, like last week, I had 2 calls from automated iPhones. Like, this caller has been involved in a crash and is not responding. Now, disclaimer, most of the time it's accidental and it can be quite bothersome. But when it is real, like, what awesome technology is that, right? That someone's calling for help when you can't yourself, and it's just like, when those drop in my hair, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, years ago, you wouldn't have thought that our phones would automatically, they would detect a crash. So not even the fact that you were like trying to call and it called anyways, it's like it felt an impact. It's like, oh, that was a big impact, let me check on them, and they're not responding, okay, we're gonna call help. Like, that's insane.
I was going to say, for me, it would be falling down on the sidewalk and I'm trying to figure out how to get up without embarrassing myself further. That would be the impact right there.
No, it's fine. Everything's fine. Don't send anybody.
But I remember when that emergency call thing started showing up on my iPhone and people were going, it'll call you, or they were saying, you could hold down, I think the call button or something, and it would call, and I'd be like, no, it won't. No, it won't. And so I finally tried it for myself, and it was like 911 emergency. I'm like, okay, on second thought, that does work.
It does work. Oh, look at that.
It does, yeah. But of course, I was a dispatcher, so I had to confirm for myself.
Right. I hear you, because I mean, there are some things, even with the technology that we use, so I've been doing this for about 5 years now, going on 5 years. And even in the amount of time that I've been here, the tech, like the rapid SOS started coming out, the text to 911 started being a thing.
Yes.
Like, that has been in the last 5 years or so, that at least at the departments that I've worked at, I'm sure they've been trickling. But I worked at a pretty big agency in Sacramento, and we got it within the 4 years that I was there. So it's wild how long it takes for the tech to come to us. And then it's also amazing the tech that we are receiving, right?
Yes. And there's a couple things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about back, I took a call from a hearing impaired person, and they were reporting a reckless driver, and they had followed them. And I'm thinking about how long that conversation took us, because we had to go back and forth between me and the translator and the caller. And it just was a very long call. And this whole text to 911 thing is just so much faster.
It really is. I have had people send me, links to their mixtapes, which, we don't get to listen to. So if you're sending that, refrain. But when they are, I've also had people report things that they're like witnessing at a bar, and they don't want to, call. They're like, these people are drunk, they're starting into a fight, and they'll text it. And, for folks who aren't very familiar with the text to 911 realm, it's not available everywhere. So definitely make sure, that it is servicing an area that you are utilizing it in. If you do text to 911, it should kick back an error message of some sort saying it did not go through if it is not serviced in that area. But if you do utilize it, it's just like making a 911 call. They're going to ask what all the W's, where are you? What's going on? And I think that can be a little hard for citizens as well, because they're like, fight. And you're like, where? And then there's like this delay, and you're waiting as a dispatcher, and they're like, this bar. And you're like, okay, can you confirm the address? You still got to do all the steps. So if you are using that service, understand we still have to ask all the questions in the manner, because it can be a slower process, though safer for the person using it, or more accessible.
Yes. And I think I just was listening to something the other day that said that the technology that brought about text to 911 was started with people who had hearing problems. And I was like, it's amazing how things that become very useful, they start in a different way, and then they They just come into mainstream technology, and we don't even think about where they originated from.
Yeah. And, for just the accessibility of it, I think when you have the ability to make a typical 911 call, you don't consider not being able to, right? So the fact that we are getting this technology, this accessible technology, is really great, and we should have had it a long time ago, right? This isn't a new problem for folks. This is definitely something that we should have had a long time ago. But luckily it is coming to light now, and folks who can't make the traditional 911 call do have that option for the text to 911 options.
Yes, it's funny. It's interesting to me that you say, you have to ask all those same questions. And I'm thinking in my head, they don't like it when they call 911 and we have to ask all those questions. Just get somebody here. I know, but I still have to ask all the same questions.
I know. I had a caller, call recently, and they were reporting a reckless driver, and they thought they were intoxicated. And so whenever someone thinks someone's intoxicated, I always like to clarify why they think that, right? Did you see them with the White Claw out the window, swinging their Nissan Altima? Or is there something else that's going on that's making you, assume that they might be intoxicated? And they were not happy with the fact that I was asking those clarifying questions because, it does make a difference if you see someone drinking alcohol versus you see them kind of swerving in the lanes. They could be elderly. They could be having a medical. The possibilities are endless as to why, that is occurring. So when your dispatcher is asking you these questions, there is a reason, I promise. It's not that we don't believe you. We believe that you believe that person is intoxicated. What I'm trying to figure out is what made you get there so I can communicate that to the folks I'm going to send this to. I promise I care just as much as you did to make the phone call. That is why I'm asking the questions. But people do get frustrated with the line of questions that we have sometimes.
They do. And then I also am thinking, and that person that you're giving that call to is going to ask you as well, can you tell me why they think they're intoxicated?
What? the units that I'm dispatching to are going to ask 400 more questions than I ask you. So I promise this is for both of us. This is so when they ask me the silly question, I can say I asked it.
Yep. And it's funny. I've been out of dispatch for 6 years. It still sounds exactly the same.
Oh my gosh. And so, or I will answer the question already in the initial dispatch, and then they'll ask me the same question. I'm like, all right, you weren't listening to me. That's cool. I'll go again. We'll tell you again. It's a silver Nissan Altima with,
And when we talk about technology and how it's changed things, having a computer in the car that has a map in it, that saved, where am I going? Where am I going? Where am I going? That saved that because they could look down and see.
I wouldn't even think about that. I wouldn't even think. I know they ask sometimes like to clarify the apartment number or the suite number when they're already out of the car. But the idea of them not having a visual representation of where they're heading is like, it's not the world of dispatch that I've grown up in, so yeah. I couldn't even imagine. I've actually done a ride along with an officer who had like they had like a little GPS thing they would bring in with them into their car. So when they would go pursuits, their map would be a little clearer, and so they could call it out a little better. And I was just like, it's just so the technology that, we need that in the car, so you don't have to bring an extra tool with you. But just the fact that we have this at our fingertips, like now it's officer safety, ease. It just all plays into it.
It does. And it's very interesting how fast everything is changing. It's just racing. Technology seems to be racing right now.
Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about the cloud, right, I feel like people are a little sketchy about the cloud as far as when we're talking about, because I just feel like our systems are so impacted, right? They have all these files, and they want our CAD to work with our records and our phones, and so the idea of our tech going all into the cloud, which what's the cloud? No one understands the cloud. What's the cloud? We don't know what the cloud is. Like what is the, I would say, benefit of a department choosing? Because I think a lot of departments are having this debate, right? When we're talking about upgrading their systems or switching to new CAD systems, going cloud-based or not. What is the benefit or the difference with the cloud-based systems that are available now to dispatch centers?
I think I heard a statistic that during the pandemic, 29% of dispatch centers were able to go remote. And if you're in the cloud, you can go remote without having to have those physical connectors. Now, you still have the considerations for you have to be able to, have it secure. You have to have NCIC protections and all of that. And I had heard that, dispatchers that were working from home had to have a place where they could lock the room up, only they had access to it. But the cloud makes it so much more versatile. So if I talk Motorola, and let me just clarify, I am not a techie person. I love technology. I love to teach software, but if you had me hooking up networks, we'd be in big trouble. I just want to clarify that. But it allows, we used to be able to hook up a lot of Motorola solutions softwares to each other, but now we can connect to even more third-party solutions. As long as they'll let us access their software, we can connect across several of our cloud products, which is, again, it allows I always tell people I'm not ever trying to upsell them because I understand and I appreciate that the fact that agencies have to get money, a lot of money from their citizens for software, and they want to get their money's worth out of it. And nobody wants to be replacing things all the time. So if we can take what you already have and we can connect it to another solution that makes it easier for you to do your job at your console, that's a win for both sides of the table.
Definitely. I think that's amazing. And when you say this stat about remote dispatching, I heard that too, that a lot of folks were doing the home dispatching and just some departments did it. And I was just like, could you imagine dispatching in your PJs? Like just chilling on, my brain goes to like the worst calls ever that I've ever experienced. And I'm like, could I imagine taking that call in my living room? At least like when I'm in my center, I can like stand up and mute and yell, like, send them this way, or like something's going on. I can alert the folks. But if I'm just yelling and my dog's the only one in the room, I'm just I would be anxious because I like the team aspect and the support. But I can take a non-emergency calls from my couch all day long. I think that's something I'd sign up for.
I don't know how I would have been at it. Even I've been working from home for a year and I still get dressed every day to go to work because I need that mindset. And I have a specific place I have to be in order to engage that fully without being completely distracted. But yeah, I can tell you that even when I started way back when, we all talked about being at home in that recliner that'll kick all the way back and our screens would be right here and we'd be able to be dispatching remotely. And it's still a dream out there, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and I definitely think some centers can do it. I mean, I think if you're not so impacted with high priority calls after another, I definitely think it's a world that can exist. It's just a world I'm a little nervous for. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'm ready for all that trust. But
we talk a lot, or I talk a lot about the success of projects. Often is about procedure and policies. How are we going to do it? We have tools. We can give lots of people tools. We can give you things that'll make things easier, but deciding how to do it, traveling across the United States, I've seen everything in hundreds of dispatch centers. And it's just very interesting to me how everybody sets things up differently. And I remember that for me, I always thought that everybody did things the same way I did. This is how we did it at my agency. So you must do it at your agency the same way. And when I started traveling around and meeting all these dispatchers and seeing all the different ways they did things, I was so stunned.
Yeah. I mean, even for me, I lateraled, from my agency to my current agency, and even just seeing the difference that occurs from those two agencies, like I thought I had it down. At my last agency, I was like, oh, I'm the best dispatcher in the world. I'm great. And then I got to my new agency. I was like, I swear I was good at this before. I don't. Why is this so different, so difficult? Like, and it's true because everybody does think, even codes. My old agency did 9 codes. Only one of 2 agencies in my area who does it. And I, of course, started the one who does 9 codes. So then when the new agency I went to, I had to learn 10 codes. And I was just like, well, this is terrible. I got to learn this whole new language, basically. And at my old agency, we didn't run folks out. We had a warrants channel that did that. So at my new agency, I'm running people out. I'm learning to read these NCIC hits that are in a whole nother language. Like, I don't know who works at NCIC and when we're talking about technology, but I'm gonna need us to upgrade that system, because sometimes I'm like, is that it?
And then the long ones that just keep going, you're like, I think they're negative. Yeah.
Yep. Out of Arkansas. I don't like, and having to even like send these like admin messages, and they're all like, we're not free form yet. It's all like line by line by line. And I'm like, this has to just be some coding. Like, again, I like tech, I'm not great. I had a MySpace at one point, so I'm sure I have a little coding experience, but there's got to just be a switch of a code where we can just turn that line to a box, where we can just freeform it. But I mean, but again, it just goes back to our technology is so slow coming in the masses, right? Through emergency services, because you're still helping folks come off paper. And I think like that's wild to me in my head. Again, I don't think I can do this job on paper. I have successfully avoided manual mode twice I've had to do it for like 2 seconds. So I've avoided it. I did not want to experience it. It is something I can live without. And the fact that folks are still working that way, or who can't map their officers. I mean, it's scary almost, I would say. Like, we have all this tech. Why don't we have it in every single one?
I remember I was in a training or a meeting. It must have been a training right before I left law enforcement. And I remember hearing a dispatcher in this training talking about her officers not having contact with her for like 2 hours sometimes in rural Idaho. And if they needed something, they'd have to go to somebody's house to make a phone call because they didn't have any radio connection and no cell service. And I remember thinking, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
I would just be so worried because I always felt so responsible.
Yeah. The anxiety that must, I mean, I guess if that's the reality, you live in it, right? But God, not hearing from them for that long, I'd be like, code 3, go that way, look for them, find them. I don't know where they are, go find them.
Yeah, and in the old days, we used to do grid searches when somebody wasn't answering their radio. We would triangulate from where they were on their last call when they cleared, and then we would start looking at how much time it had been, and then we'd start sending officers to go look and then close that grid. And
that would be your responsibility to set out that grid for the officers?
We started it. The shift commander would, direct. We never had full control of that, but that's how we would start it out. And every time that I had to do that, it was somebody who'd turn their radio off and they forgot to turn it back on when they got in their car. But it was very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I mean, I could only imagine. I mean, even now, I had someone key up and, status, no answer. And someone, I'll tell my partner, like, can you call them? Like, they're not on the board. They're not on a call. So I'm not too worried, but I'm going to have to start beeping out and doing all this nonsense. And they call, they're like, oh, I'm getting burritos. I must have clicked my mic. And I'm like, First of all, bring a burrito up here as a sorry first. Second. But that whole time, like the anxiety that goes up because you kick into your process, right? Whatever your agency tells you what to do. And it's typically, I would say, generally like, blah, blah, blah. Do you have traffic? Blah, blah, blah. No answer. Beep, blah, blah, blah. Okay, units to start, beepers on, we're looking for person. And then they'll call them up, traffic for da-da-da. And you're like, yes, beepers on for you. Like, good. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm like, beepers off. Everything's fine. But like the anxiety that happens during, because you never know. Nowadays, especially, you never know what's going on out there and what they're dealing with.
I agree 100%, which would lead me to more technology that one of the things that I've heard is that some dispatchers will start to be able to view body camera footage when the body camera is turned on. And I've thought to myself, I don't really even understand how that would have been impacted me as a dispatcher and how I would like that. Because I'm already involved in the call and my imagination is making up its own story. Mm-hmm. But now I'm putting that visual to it. So I stay consistently intrigued by the technologies that are coming out.
I think I would appreciate the after the fact access to it. I don't know how I would feel watching it during it, because I almost feel like it's invading my officer's privacy, right? Because they act a certain way when they're out there in the field doing their job, trying to gain control, trying to create relationships, trust, all that. And I don't know, like I wouldn't want someone watching me dispatch, like over my shoulder or something like that. I don't know how, but I like to watch it after the fact. I would for sure like, what happened? Let me see that call. Like I love when I'm able to see the body worn for some of our crazy calls. I don't know, during it, I don't know. I feel weird. Like, can they hear me? Can they see? Like.
Would you be yelling at the screen?
Right? Like, would it be like a basketball game and I'm like rooting for folks and like we're in a light pursuit and I'm like, oh, we gotta work. We're out of shape here. We can see we need to work out more.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And in 1992 when I started, I never thought about body worn cameras. I never thought about being more than an ear, a voice in their ear. That's basically what we were at that time.
Yeah. And I would say that it's probably because at my last agency, I didn't know a lot of my officers unless they happened to be working in the beat where my comm center was, because we were a clean bathroom for them to stop at. So they would come into our comm center a lot. But here at my new agency, I know a lot of these folks. I know about their kids. I know about their personal lives, So I think there's just a different level of that. Like when they do go to a hot call, not that I didn't care before, it's just now I have all this backstory with the folks that I'm sending out. So the level of care is more personal, than like, this is my job. I'm going to make sure you like this. Like, no, this is Billy. And I'm going to make sure Billy gets home to, the wife, the kid, the dog, and the rabbit that they don't want, but they have because their kid found it outside. Like I know all of those things. And I think that can make the job more difficult, but also more rewarding, right? Like I love the fact that I have the relationship that I do with all the folks who are out there in the field. But I don't know if I'd want to see them doing that job in the moment that they're doing it because I know them. All right. What advice would you give someone considering a career in dispatch?
Know that you're going to need a tough skin, and it's not just because you're going to work with some people who are going to rub you wrong. They may not be easy to get along with. They may have come from completely different backgrounds than you. They may have no life knowledge, but the callers also never call you on their best days. And I sometimes will I call them the ghost of calls past that just float up. They'll always be with me. And no matter what I do, I was a part of that person's life during a especially traumatic event for them. And they became traumatic events for me too, because I was involved as part of that. So understand that even though dispatchers coming into the profession today are getting I hope they're getting a whole different education about building that resiliency, and they're getting better education about, hey, you got to take care of yourself. You cannot identify as I'm a dispatcher. You're a person who works as a dispatcher. And I think that understanding that when people talk to you about, really, you got to take time off. You cannot work tons and tons of overtime. You have to eat well. You have to get rest. Those are things that they have to really focus on if they want to have a long, fruitful career, because the inside stuff will get to you and the outside stuff will get to you.
Definitely. It's so true. And with all that being said, how do you feel the job has changed you? I mean, you've gone, from the military into this type of career, all the technology that changes in the world, let alone in the comm centers. How do you think this job has changed you?
So I went from 911 and law enforcement, which law enforcement changed while I was in law enforcement. We had our police department shot at while we were at work. We had a homemade bomb put right outside of our dispatch center. We had to cross the street to go to where we parked, and we were scared of that. Thankfully, we got a new building before I left. And so we already had some of that, but I went from law enforcement, where you have this, super hyper vigilance, to traveling across the United States 42 weeks a year. And everybody, to me, is possibly doing something. I'm always hyper vigilant. I'm always watching. I'm always anticipating. I'm always trying to make sure I'm not putting myself in situations where I'm going to have problems. My favorite story about this is I've been out on the road as a trainer. We would go mostly by ourselves if we were training. If we were doing go lives with the software, then we went with a team, but you'd still get assigned to night shift. And I was working at this agency outside of Matson, Illinois, which is in the Chicago area. And I was working the night shift, and I think we were scheduled. I was training till I think 3:00 in the morning, and they told me, do not go behind the hotel where you're staying, because that's where most of the violent homeless are. So, where is open to park when you get off work at 3:00 in the morning? I would just be like, I'm just going to pray myself into that hotel. I was really quiet. I'm really quiet when I shut the doors. I don't slam my trunk. All of those things are things that are because I was a 911 operator.
It is so true, because even like my fiance, like we have this debate all the time. I'm like, take your phone with you. You can go outside, you'd walk the dog, go in the mailbox. Why aren't we bringing our phone? I mean, I don't, such a simple thing. You never know what's going to happen. And they're always like, it's going to be fine. I'm like, but
and
there is the possibility that it's not fine.
My husband goes to the store, comes home. I have the door locked. He's like, why do you lock the door?
Right.
Because I'm in the house by myself.
Oh my God. Yesterday I came home. I worked my short day. So I only worked 6 hours, and I came home. So I probably got home around 12:30. And I go to open the door, and it's like slightly open. Like it's like they tried to close it, but it didn't close all the way. And I open the door, and they're on the couch, like eating. And I'm like, are we just letting anybody in here? Like, what is going on? They're like, oh, I guess they didn't close it all the way. And I'm like, what do you mean?
And your dispatcher brain already went to, oh my gosh, there are so many things that could have happened.
Right. And in our area, because we're in the Bay Area, there's a lot of unhoused folks who kind of roll around right next to the dumpster in our property. Like, come on, man. It'll just take someone to, is that slightly open? So we always have like the awareness. It's just not on the same level as I would say a dispatcher's.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, man. All right. So I think one of the final questions I want to ask you, and it's something that I think a lot of folks who have been in the game a long time, and when they're thinking about what to do next, is what has life after dispatch been like for you? You know, you finally pulled that trigger and you left actually answering 911 calls. Of course, you're still in the realm and helping folks in centers and bringing that technology with Motorola into our centers. But how was that change for you, and how has it been since making that change?
It was difficult. When you leave an agency, it's often like getting a divorce because they stay in the same routine. They're still showing up, they're still going to calls, and you're not on the inside anymore of what's going on. And when big cases happen, you don't really have anybody to call and go, what happened with that? Because you're not on the in anymore. And that was super hard for me. Especially after being with these people for 22 years. I went from a agency that's like what you're talking about. We had, just a few sworn, we had just a few dispatchers. We knew their wives, we knew their kids, we knew all about them. We had, I think, 3 people on a shift when I started there. Mm-hmm. And one of them was a lieutenant, a sergeant, and then a patrolman. Mm-hmm. And when I left, we had 4 shifts of 8. Wow. That we were running per day. And so we had the reverse. We went from this family structure where we all knew each other to we didn't know anybody. People we just didn't get to know them. And part of it was because when they built the new police department, patrol was on the 1st floor and dispatch was on the 3rd floor. Mm-hmm. So patrol's not coming up to the 3rd floor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think that I am extremely blessed that I was able to move into the same software that I worked with at my agency. And then I was able to take all of that experience that I had as a dispatcher with the software that I'd used for a long time, and then be able to teach it to other people. The scary part was I had to learn the parts of the software I didn't know because they weren't dispatch related. Like, I don't know what to do with evidence.
Yeah. Not my job.
Yeah. And the first time I watched a jail class, I'm like, oh, you have to take clothes from them and give them clothes. I'd never thought about that because I was never a jailer. So, yeah. But I think that there's a significant amount of dispatchers that get into dispatch and they feel trapped because they're really good at it. Mm-hmm. And we know that the high statistic is that, lots of people wash out of training, but there is life after dispatch, and you can stay engaged with the community. You can use that experience that you've gained at your agency, and you can use that to help other people on a wider scale, whether it's working with the software, whether it's working with something that's connected to dispatch. If I wasn't doing this, I probably would be doing some type of working towards a therapy type job to work with people. Mm-hmm. Because I always loved that part of talking to people as well, to try to help them solve things. But now I just get to solve things with law enforcement, and I understand their language. So I always encourage people. I always say there is life after dispatch. It's just hard to think about it because we get locked into sometimes it's a good paycheck. Sometimes it's not a good paycheck. Mm-hmm. It is, your holidays, it's your benefits. It's shifts. 12-hour shifts for me as a single mom were great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. Like I get Christmas Day off this year, and for the first time in like 5 years, I'm getting weekends off during my next shift cycle, and I'm like, this is wild. Like this is a whole new world. But it's so true. Like there are such benefits that can get us locked in. Then if you are a dispatcher who is in the place of you're feeling burnt out, you're feeling like, every single call is a bother rather than helping folks, like you said, there is life after dispatch, and there are these wonderful companies like Motorola Solutions that really value the experience and the knowledge that dispatchers have gained over their career, and they do find value of putting them into roles to help affect other comm centers within their technology, which I think is awesome. And it's something that I am learning more about by doing this Let's Talk Dispatch stuff, right? I'm meeting folks that are working at these different companies, and that's another reason, like, I like meeting with especially businesses, because people might want to be done with answering 911, but still want to be in this line of work in some way, shape, or form, and don't know how to do it. And us having this conversation may have someone go apply for Motorola Solutions, and I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. I think one of the other things that I just would chime in is that when we talk about burnout, I think one of the other things that new people should know is that you're going to hit walls. Mm-hmm. If you're going to have a long career, can I just say that these women that are retiring from dispatch, they have my complete respect. These women and men, I'm so in awe of them. Mm-hmm. But they had to go through their burnout times too, and they had to find a way to continue past that. So you have to be able to anticipate and know that you're going to hit those walls, mm-hmm. and you can work through them if that's something that you want to continue on with. There's no shame in leaving dispatch, even though I think all of us feel a little bit like, I'm not doing it anymore. Wow. But there really is life after dispatch, and it's been fun. I have so enjoyed meeting all these dispatchers, all these law enforcement folks around the country, and the travel has been amazing. Mm. So it's like having friends everywhere. It's the best.
That's awesome. I mean, the world needs more dispatchers, but we need happy dispatchers, right? We need folks to love what they're doing. Like you said, take care of their bodies, physically, mentally. I mean, it's all taxing. So I think it's important, and it's valid that we acknowledge all that when we're talking about getting more of these butts in the seats, because they are needed. But if it ain't for you no more, that is okay as well.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, I think that what you're doing is amazing. I love your slogan. I think that we do need more dispatchers. I think that the dispatchers of the future are going to look a little different. Mm-hmm. They're going to come in more technologically already knowledgeable, and they're just going to have all these really great tools.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah, it's amazing to me.
I think I'll be jealous. I want to be able to like dispatch like what is it, Tony Stark, and the, want to be able, you go there. All right, I got 911 call coming in,
Yeah.
I'm all for that. I'm going to be like 100 years old in the centers, like playing with that technology,
I do. I 100% do. And when I moved over to this new software, I was like, I don't know. And then I was just like, I'm in. I'm 100% in.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eda, for coming out and chatting with me today about all this awesome software. If folks want to talk to you more about Motorola Solutions, where do they go? How do they get in touch?
They can email my personal account, which is Eda Beams at iCloud.com. And if they're already Motorola Solutions customers, they can get more information through their customer success folks.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. I'm going to kick you out, and I'll be right back with you.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode here. Let's Talk Dispatch. Eda, thank you again for joining me today, telling me about your awesome career, and just really acknowledging and educating me about how far our technology has come as 911 dispatchers over the years. I really enjoyed learning about that. I really enjoy technology, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds for tech and 911 dispatch. Of course, like, subscribe, tell a friend, check out our Patreon, and until next time, stay raspy, everybody. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube at The Raspy Dispatcher, follow us on Instagram, and check out Let's Talk Dispatch anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'll see you next